Good morning, Charles. How are you doing today?
Beautifully, thank you.
I got to tell you, dude, if this were the Johnny Depp trial, you are my star witness because I got to put you on the stand. Man, you have information in this book that the jury needs to find out what is going on so that we can finally bring a conclusion to this case.
My book does, and you know, I had, as the book explains, I had over 56 homicides that I handled in my career as the chief of homicide for the state of Delaware, and I throw in some to make a point about a legal point. For example, I'll explain about one of the cases I handled, one of the mafia cases that one of the many homicide cases that I handled as chief of the office.
When you dig in deep like this, though, Charles, I mean, my God, you got to be looking over your shoulder because I mean, you are really good at digging.
Well, I made my mark as an interrogator at a time when you could interrogate. The Supreme Court has watered down the ability to interrogate. A classic example that I cite is the O.J. Simpson white Bronco ride that he took when he knew it was over. He knew he was caught, defeated, and about to go down for a double homicide. And he had a buddy of his from the old football days taking him to an airport. He had his passport, he had a wig, and he had a gun. And a couple of times he put the gun in his mouth to show the cops that were following him that he had that gun. And when he arrived at his home and stepped out of his white Bronco, the police on the ground, under Earl Warren's laws, were not allowed to ask him a single question.
Wow.
Because he had a lawyer. And that ridiculous rule that as I entered Brooklyn Law School in 1966, that rule had just come out. I worked in the library, and the library was jammed with professors who wanted a copy of the new rule, the Miranda rules. And they were as baffled by it as anyone. And when I got my job in the Delaware Attorney General's office as the chief of homicide, it was a job that my very terrific boss, Attorney General Laird Stabler, he created the job when he hired me. He wanted me to go to every crime scene that had a murder and make sure that the police didn't fail to do something technical that needed to be done, and the whole case get thrown out. And they were throwing out cases back then in 1960, 61, 62. And I was in East Harlem. I was a New York City welfare investigator, and I saw it happen right before my eyes. I saw the drug explosion occur. In my day, if you wanted drugs, you would have to go to 100th Street in East Harlem, one block, and it was the one block that the police allowed the sale of marijuana and heroin were the drugs of the day. But it blossomed and grew from those days to what we have now, where fentanyl is being brought in into our country, and our kids are being exposed to it.
Yeah, just the other day. I mean,
it's all the result of the Warren Court.
Okay,
and I explain that too because it's an important way to understand the mafia and the mafia's role in the JFK assassination.
It's one of the 7 mysteries of the world. The JFK assassination. Except I always call it the execution because I mean it was brutal, and we watch those films over and over again, and we all try to piece it together. And that's why I love this book because you give us the opportunity to find focus and not rely on 7-second video clips and things like that.
Yeah, and also amateurs. I mean, no offense to those wonderful writers who kept the story alive. They knew something was wrong with the investigation. They just didn't have an professional understanding of the deviousness of Earl Warren and the plotting of Lyndon Johnson and the plotting of Bobby Kennedy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, we have if you're old enough to remember the funeral, it was one of the saddest things. And I'm Italian, so we cry at the drop of a hat. My mother's house was full of people crying.
Mm-hmm.
Carolina DiMarco, they didn't come to America for this crap. And and excuse me, I have to get another Kleenex. and and I realized in handling in investigating it as I would any uh, murder case, and as I did many murder cases, handling it that way, the way a professional would handle it, it's an easy case. It didn't need to be a muddle. It didn't need to have well-meaning writers trying to figure it out. It was so handleable. It isn't funny.
The book we're talking about is Suppressing the Truth in Dallas. You know what one of the touching things here about this book is that millennials and Generation Zers do not know who Chief Justice Earl Warren is. And you say, look, I need to share this with you because beyond our generation, they're going to forget about this moment, and they can't. They can't.
They can't. And I truly, if you believe what I say here now, as an accomplished lawyer, apart from the homicides, I also was a medical malpractice lawyer, and brought home giant verdicts in a very successful career after I left the homicide career. And my last homicide was I defended some homicides as well. And the last one that I handled was the head of the pagan motorcycle gang was arrested for killing two witnesses and leaving their bodies in the Pine Barrens in New Jersey. And you know, my experience went both ways. And every once in a while, I'll get a wise guy who wants to challenge me. And I just say, well, how many shoplifting cases did you handle? Because I know you never handled a murder case.
Lyndon B. Johnson, did he have the nation fooled? Because there are so many stories about this man from Texas. And it's almost like that there was no plot, but what happened with the Bay of Pigs that could have led to something?
Oh, I analyze it as one of my proudest moments when I figured out the Bay of Pigs invasion. And you know, it was I can't tell you in a little radio interview that's going to end in 20 minutes maybe, but the book lays it out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every detail, chapter and verse, and that most authors, almost all authors but me, let's put it that way, look at the Bay of Pigs invasion and blame JFK for not having the courage to provide air support for the Cuban exiles on the shore in Cuba, in Havana. And yes, he did not order an air cover for the Cuban exiles. Mm-hmm. But I analyze it step by step of what happened and what it all means. And it means that they had another plan. And I show that plan completely, fully. And there's no question but that I would have won the case quickly if I took it to trial as a homicide investigator in those days.
Your style of writing... Your style of writing, I defrag and things. Like, for instance, like what I love about your book is that I defrag it. In other words, I take notes and I sit there and I go, if I were there, what would I do? It's almost like you're giving us this story to put in our own mind and heart to figure it out on the spot as we're reading it.
Thank you. And that was as a homicide investigator and jury trial lawyer. That was my job. It's what I did for a living. They gave me a paltry paycheck. $15,000 a year, but that's what I did.
Wow.
And I appreciate your picking up on it.
I got to know who Carlos.
That's my goal, is to let the country pick up on it.
Well, and it's going to create conversation. So I'm not going to be shocked if 60 Minutes doesn't grab your hand and says, you need to talk to us, Charles. What do you know that we have not known about? Because our main guy, sat there and said, well, the president has been shot. I mean, now it's time to get the real story here.
Yeah, this is the real story, and it's not a long book, so it would make a good 60-minute segment, I'm sure. But I'm very confident that it's going to become the standard history.
Yeah. Well, and don't you think
as my last book on the Hoffa murder?
Yes.
By the Irishman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where do you get the confidence and the courage to step into these moments where you? I mean, it's like Jimmy Hoffa as well as JFK and stuff like that. Because I mean, most people like to run away from history. You're going, no, I'm facing the fire. I'm going in there.
Well, I did mention, I think, that I was raised Italian in New York City.
Yes.
I think that answers that one. We're not exactly known for running away from trouble.
Carlos Marcello. I mean, this is a name that until I read your book, I didn't know Carlos, but you give us that opportunity.
Yeah, and when I put in the book that I had a eureka moment, and I ran to my research notes, to look for a date that I needed in my writing, and there it was waiting for me. And I immediately knew that this is what got this information here is what got JFK killed. And I show that, and it's unassailable. I mean, there's no way around it. This is the real McCoy. This is not some fancy idea that I had.
So
I'm still in touch with my old homicide investigators. You want to hear an anecdote?
Absolutely.
All right. So I was at home in Sun Valley, Idaho, where I live, and I got a call from a former head of the Wilmington, Delaware homicide squad. We worked many a case together. His name is Stan Friedman. And Stan is an ex-Marine, and he was in charge of the Wilmington, Delaware Police Department's homicide squad. And Stan was on his way to a reunion of Wilmington policemen with his wife, Alma, and he called me. We just shot the breeze, and every once in a while we'll reminisce about various murderers that we handled. And when it was about time for him to pay attention to his driving, so that he could get up the Jersey Turnpike to the reunion, I said to him, Stan, if you run into any people from my era at the reunion, say hi to me. I still miss that work. And Stan said, I will. And I said, well, it was from 1971 to 1976. And Stan said, wait a minute, Charlie. Are you trying to tell me that you were only in the office for 5 years? And I said, well, it was actually 6 years, Stan. And Stan said, if I had to guess, I'd have said 20 years, all the shit you did. And that's the best compliment I ever got from my homicide work.
You know, with all of your connections and understanding family, we'll call it family, not necessarily mafia, but family. I mean, John Gotti was the Teflon Don. Are we not living that right now with the former president? Is that somebody is convinced that they are the Teflon Don?
I don't know what you're talking about. It sounds political, and I try to stay away from politics.
All right, let's don't go there then, because we'll focus on John Gotti. It's like that to me is also a story that I wish that you would dig into.
Well, you sound just like my agent. When I showed him my first draft, he said, Charlie, it lacks focus. And I realized, I have so many war stories that I could just stop anywhere and tell you an anecdote. And maybe I will right now. We had a young girl, a beautiful girl, a model, wannabe model, who stopped at a Chinese restaurant in Wilmington for her lunch to bring home to her desk, and she disappeared. It turned out she had been put into a suitcase in body parts
Mm-hmm.
by an employee of that Chinese restaurant named Cheng Wo Hua. He had jumped ship from China, and this was 1970, let's say, and he obviously did this to this girl. When he was found by Wilmington police, he had blood and hair on his shoes, and it was just gruesome. And Earl Warren and his Supreme Court in 1972 had just eliminated our right to have a death penalty if we wanted one as a people, state by state. Every state had a death penalty except I think Michigan, and that was because that's what the people wanted. And now what are they going to do? They've got this man who doesn't speak a word of English, and he jumped ship, and there's no death penalty anymore. And so my superiors, this wasn't one of my cases, but it's a good story. My superiors in the Attorney General's office and the higher ups like Stan Friedman in the Wilmington Police Department deported him. They brought him to Chinese authorities and handed him over, and they executed him for the crime of jumping ship. You may remember that communists were not allowed, they didn't allow people to leave the country, and still don't. And that's how Cheng Wo Hua was handled. Kind of interesting, isn't it?
It is. Everything about you is very interesting, and as you release these stories from your personal experiences, it's got to open the door for you to experience newer things. Has there been something that it's like, wow, now that I've let this go, I'm doing this now?
Well, at 80, you accumulate a lot of stories in my field, and my related field. I was also a renowned medical malpractice trial lawyer, where I would bring home verdicts in the millions. Wow. Before I retired from that, and some of them are fascinating in the sense that a hospital tries to fix a case so that they try to hide evidence.
Yep.
And so it becomes a bit of a mystery. And I was the guy. I was the guy that handled it and was voted every year as the top medical malpractice lawyer in my jurisdiction.
What a story. Charles, you got to come back to this show anytime in the future. I want to hear more and more of your stories.
Got him.
Just like that.
Step right up, my war story. And that's how my agent said, "You're losing focus, Charlie."
Hey, Arrow, if you guys want, and you can go a little bit longer because we have a break now until 10:35 or so. So if it's if you guys can do it.
Are you okay?
Try and stop me. My wife will tell you you're wasting your time trying to stop this windbag.
So
we're newlyweds, 47 years.
Wow. Are you? Wow. See, I'm at 30. There's just something about a relationship like that really gives you strength in not only your personal life but your career life as well. You need those 47 years to continue being what you do every day.
I couldn't do any of it without her.
Yep. Wow. So now, where did this investigative side come from you? Was it planted by somebody in your family, or was it the fact that you just love mysteries?
Well, that's a good question, and I worked as a welfare department investigator in East Harlem, And East Harlem at that time was controlled by the Genovese crime family.
Oh yeah.
And in the movie version of my prior book, I Heard You Paint Houses, The Irishman, they show the mob in charge of East Harlem. They show Fat Tony Salerno's so-called social club, but headquarters, and some important meetings that occurred there about Hoffa, with Russell Buffalino, the crime boss of rural Pennsylvania, and in these meetings, and those meetings really happened, and they happened the way they're portrayed in the book. They were portrayed that way in the movie. I had the privilege of working on the movie with Scorsese, De Niro, and the great screenwriter Steve Zalian, and I handled a lot of material for them to try to get at the exact truth. So there was nothing in that movie that is hyperbole, nothing in that movie that is overblown, and there's no reason to when you have the kind of material that I have in my head. It was a wonderful experience working with those people.
Well, as a viewer, it was a wonderful experience to spend my Thanksgiving Day watching all 4 hours of that presentation, and to see that we're right
here.
Good man. Oh my God, dude, you have no idea that I was so drawn to that story, and then to be talking with you about. I mean, without you, there may have never been words, because they needed what you experienced and what you researched in order to put that up there.
Yeah. Now they and the prime mover was Robert De Niro. If it were not for him, the movie would have never been made. He fell in love with the character of Frank the Irishman Sheeran, and he became determined to play him on the screen. How he didn't win an Oscar, I'll never know. But it's politics. It was time for Koreans to win an Oscar.
Not only that, but there was also a battle that was going on, that this was on television and not on the big screen, and that war continues to grow today. Thank God they're finally letting these presentations on the Netflixes and the Hulus and stuff like that get awards. But the thing is, though, is that your participation with this project opened the door for what we're seeing right now, which is movies being streamed on television.
Yeah, it helped do that for sure. And they were wonderful people. I mean, they're not, it's been and continues to be an amazing experience. And then to follow up that book on Hoffa, and from the interrogations I did of the principal suspect in the Hoffa disappearance, and there was a guy going around trying to claim on TV that he knew where the body was, and then he would get somebody to dig another hole. I don't know how many holes they dug, but we didn't pay attention to them. And as Frank Sheeran said, he was still alive at the time. He said to me, if they had buried Hoffa, they actually used what Frank Sheeran in his accent called an incinerary. They used an incinerary. If they had instead buried him, Frank Sheeran assured me he'd have been found by now.
Right.
There's no way to bury somebody as prominent as that without getting caught and without getting informants coming in with the true stories instead of the BS that appeared on TV.
Now, Charles, do you feel like, after you've experienced it, do you feel like the journalist, the storyteller, or the archaeologist?
Do I feel like the journalist or what, sir?
A journalist, a storyteller, or an archaeologist? Because, I mean, you fit so well into every one of those descriptions, because you are bringing history back to us. It's almost like you went out there, you dug up the ground, you found the truth, you're bringing it to us.
Well, I want to brag a little, but Michael Baden, the former medical examiner for the city of New York, who appears as an expert on TV a lot in medical examining. You know of him, Mike Baden?
Mm-mm.
No? Anyway, he's a famous forensic pathologist. He was used in all the major cases, and of course he was used in the JFK revisit. The JFK case was revisited in the late 70s for a brief cup of coffee, and they found out some things that I found useful for my book, for my JFK book, my Dallas book, and anyway, he was impressed with how well written it was. And I appreciated that as much as I appreciated being impressed that I solved it, you know. And I had already solved the Hoffa mystery.
Right.
So, and 50, as I said, 56 cases that I handled, murder cases that I handled. And in a day when you could interrogate.
Right.
You know, interrogation was watered down and destroyed basically by Earl Warren.
Did that change you in the everyday world in the way that if you couldn't interrogate, how am I supposed to have a conversation with somebody? You think I'm interrogating you? No, I just want to ask a simple question. Did it change you as a regular person?
Not really. As a regular person, as a citizen, you mean?
Yeah, of course. Because so many times we're all consumed by our career.
The Earl Warren rules I exposed, but it's kind of dry. I exposed in a Reader's Digest article in 1990. I've been going after these rules that handcuff police for a long time. I just lost a second cousin to fentanyl in the South. And she was a young girl, and the police, ever since Giuliani left the city of New York, the police remain handcuffed, and those cases of Earl Warren's are responsible for the drug problem in America. I got an unsolicited letter from then President Reagan. This was in maybe the 80s. And he wrote me a letter. He had just read a book of mine called The Right to Remain Silent. And that book exposes how police work was changed overnight by Earl Warren. And you couldn't do this and you couldn't do that. And that's how I ended up having a career, because I applied for a deputy attorney general's job in the Delaware Attorney General's office. And the Attorney General said to me, I have a special job for you because you've lived. You have had a normal life. I was a forklift operator at the Chrysler plant. I was a welfare department investigator. I was a school teacher. Wherever I could grab a quick buck, I worked, you know. And he said, I like your vast experience. And I, as opposed to somebody fresh out of law school,
right,
who's more of a bookish person, you've been in the real world. And what I want you to do is come to work, not just as a homicide prosecutor, but I want you to come to our office as a homicide investigator, where the police have your phone number, all the detectives, the homicide squads, and they call you whenever there's a homicide, whenever there's a body found. And at the time, it was a job that paid $15,000 a year, and I had to use my own Dodge Dart standard transmission because it was $150 cheaper.
Oh my God!
And the cops that I worked with fell in love with me, and I fell in love with them, and we're still in touch. Well, the cops die. People don't realize that cops die young.
Yes.
Second only to firemen.
Wow.
And miners comes third. But cops die young. And I lost a lot of very talented, very wonderful people in my life to cops.
How do you deal with that personally? Because and the reason why I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I have a very close friend that became the photographer at a lot of murder scenes. My friend became literally insane because it affected him emotionally, personally, as well as spiritually. You get this close to a murder case. How are you so strong, Charles?
Well, you do what the ones before you who were on the scene with you, you just imitate. So I went up to a very renowned local Wilmington detective named Charlie Burke, and he had just gotten a confession. Despite the rules that make it hard, he had just gotten a confession to a murder case where a guy named Randolph Dickerson, a heroin addict, had climbed down the fire escape in an apartment to use his jimmy, his screwdriver, and break into the apartment and rifle the drawers of a woman, a black woman who sold Bibles as a living. That's how she supported herself. She went around door to door selling Bibles. And it became the Bible sales lady case. And she surprised Randolph coming home early and surprised him going through her drawer. And he stabbed her to death with the screwdriver. And Charlie Burke managed to get a confession out of him. And I said to Charlie and to his then boss, Stan Friedman, Charlie's now gone, but Stan Friedman's still more than around. We're in touch weekly. And Stash, we used to call him, which is Polish for Stanley. He wasn't Polish, by the way. But anyway, we're in touch a lot. And he and Charlie, almost at the same time, said these prophetic words to me. I'm going to use Charlie Burke's Delaware accent. They want to tell you, Charles.
They want to tell you.
They want to tell you. And I thought to myself, I was brand new. It wasn't my case, the Dickerson case. It was the case of one of the bosses. And I thought to myself, yeah, if you lean on them, I guess they want to tell you. Because I knew that side of things too, growing up Italian in New York City. The police leaned on us. If there was a fight on the corner, two guys having a fist fight, and the cops rolled up, everyone would have to get up against the wall.
Yep.
Remove their handkerchief from their back pocket. We all carried hankies in those days. Spread it out on the asphalt, and then empty our pockets and fill the handkerchief with whatever was in our pockets.
Yep.
So we knew never to have a blade longer than 6 inches, because that was against the law.
Yep.
We definitely knew in New York in those days to have no guns. Now they did have zip guns, but they were used for a specific purpose. But you did not have a real gun, because they would throw the book at you. And there was no such thing as a bad search. There was no such thing as lawyering up. I hear that and I want to go bananas. and I figured out ways for myself to get around these rules. And as the chief deputy, I knew how to do it.
Wow.
And I did it. And if I crossed the line, that was up to a higher court to throw my case out. But I knew they wouldn't, because I knew how I handled it from the moment I arrived at the murder scene, how I handled it.
Wow.
I'll give you an example. A murderer, essentially, although the policeman that was shot wasn't killed. He was almost killed. It was attempted murder. He was working what they call a pay job, where he gets paid on the side for security work. And he was doing security for a Jack-in-the-Box. He heard some noise by the dumpsters, and he came out to take a look. And a guy who was there to rob the Jack-in-the-Box had a .22 rifle
Hmm.
and shot the police officer in the head. Fortunately, it was a .22 and not something more serious. And that was my case. Obviously, I was chief of the office, and they didn't know who did it. It was done at night, and I began investigating, and found the guy. We focused on a guy that had just skipped sentencing on another case of his, and he was going to get a 5-year sentence. And instead of arresting him for the murder, I had him arrested on that warrant, that outstanding warrant, which allowed me to spend more time with him than I otherwise would have been allowed to do. And I was the king of interrogation.
Oh my God, Charles!
I taught it to the cops. It's a gift.
It is. It is, and it's been a gift.
You'll meet an interrogator in my book, the Dallas Police Department's championship interrogator, by the name of Captain Will Fritz, and the feds, the Federal Warren Commission, elbowed the Dallas police out of the case, but it was a Dallas case. It was not a federal case. In those days, there was no such thing as the crime of murdering a president, or in fact, the FBI had no jurisdiction,
right.
And they just elbowed their way in.
Wow!
And they did it because they knew that the investigation into this president's murder could lead to the exposure of some very high ups.
Wow!
Very good friends of theirs. And I expose every one of them.
I love it. I love it.
In the first chapter, I expose 6 of them. I name them.
I love it.
I name names.
Well, they've got to get the book. They've got to get the book. Charles, I've been blessed to have this conversation with you today, and I know we're going to meet again because, like I said, I want these stories, and I know that, we just got to get more time to where we can sit here and document all of the stuff that's inside your heart. Please come back to the show.
You're in Connecticut. You're in Connecticut, right?
I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's it's the East Coast. How about if we just say that? It's on the East Coast. We're all connected.
Yeah, I have family in South Carolina.
Oh, beautiful.
They got off the boat in 1911 from Italy, and I've got these cousins that have white skin, freckles, red hair, with the last name DeMarco.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Oh.
Well, you be brilliant today, okay, sir? And Bill, I apologize for exceeding the limits, man.
No, that's fine. It was so interesting. Definitely. No, not an issue.
Oh, I love Charles. He's got to come back. He's got to come back.
I'm your man.
Thank you.
I'll bring him back.
Thank you so much, guys.
Talk to you later, Arrow.
You bet. Bye,
I
guys.
want to say one thing. Thanks to whoever has read the book, because it's a book that begs to be read, cries out to be read from start to finish. It isn't a book you can skim. And I tell people it's like a Charlie Chan book, where at the end of the book, everybody's brought into the drawing room, and Charlie reviews the case item by item by item. And every single detail matters, as if you were the jury, and I was the prosecuting attorney with 56 homicides to my credit. And when I left the office, I had 4 men on death row. Now they weren't hung, although that was the prescribed. They were sentenced to hang, but the Earl Warren Supreme Court did away with our right to have a death penalty if we wanted one.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, sir. Until next time, be brilliant. Okay.
Okay.